Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. Good evening. It's March 18, meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Committee on Facilities, and I'm chairing this evening Ed Tate, board member, and we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves. Dr. Fraser, please.
Thank you. Robert Fraser, Superintendent.
Kristen Marcel, School Board.
Mike Thorward, School Board.
Mark Bialik, School Board.
Doug Taylor, Director of Operations.
Arif Fazil, Dewey Engineering.
Bill Stone, Business Manager.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
And David Schrader with Schrader Group.
Denise Brooks, School Board.
Marianne McKee, School Board.
Andy Block, School Board.
Thank you, everyone. We'll dive right in. I was going to make one suggestion, and as opposed to holding all our questions until the very end, we can, I think, very appropriately ask questions at the end of the presentation on each distinct project that Mr. Taylor is going to present. So I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Tate, and again, good evening to everyone. So I'm just going to take a minute here to table set. We, as the community knows, have put 4 different projects out to bid. One of those being the renovation of Hillcrest Elementary School, Richboro Elementary School. We also put out a combined bid process for those 2 schools, a renovation in addition to Sewell Finestone as another one of these projects, and then the final project was is a turf field at Council Rock High School South, as well as a combined bid, turf at South, as well as refurbishment of the tennis courts at South. So the bulk of this evening is going to consist of Mr. Taylor walking us through those projects, walking us through those bid results, the solo bid results, as well as the combined bid results. We do have Dewey Engineering here and Schrader Architecture Group here, as you just heard, so that's great as well, so that they can supplement and augment this evening and help us to answer questions. And then at the end of those particular sets of presentations, we'll hear relatively briefly from Mr. Stone from a financial and financing end. There isn't a tremendous amount of information to present, but there is very important and consequential information to present relative to the debt service line item in the budget, which of course is where this funding would come from. So there aren't going to be any easy answers, I don't believe, around this. Any of these projects or all of these projects administratively. I acknowledge that I am struggling to come up even with an administrative recommendation. So coming into this evening, what we want to do both from a facilities standpoint and from a fiscal standpoint is to present the pros, to present the cons, and then be able to, as Mr. Tate said, answer questions that folks have project by project, and then of course at the end from a funding standpoint. So with that, Mr. Taylor, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you. So as you said, I do have 2 guests here tonight. I have Arif Fazil from Dewey and David Schrader from Schrader Group. I do invite them to join me if they have something to add. To please just feel free to add any comments as we go. There are a lot of slides. I want to move through some of these expeditiously so there's time for conversation. I think that's most important. Hillcrest Elementary results will be reviewed. The Richboro results, Sewell Finestone, Council Rock South, turf and tennis, and some 2021 summer project results as well. I'm going to start the presentation by letting David Schrader give you a brief overview of the plans for Hillcrest and Richboro Elementary School.
Okay, thank you, Doug, and thank you, everyone. So to keep this brief, you're seeing the floor plan here and the site plan of the Hillcrest Elementary School project. In each project, each of the 2, we were trying to handle, first of all, the site traffic. So you'll see we were able, in this case, obviously, to share with Holland Middle School. And you'll see a new parking lot on the left-hand side of the slide, which allows for both expanded parking and the potential for expanded parent drop-off line to make sure that we keep vehicles off of East Holland Road. So there are a mixture of project-related site amenities that, thank you, that we deal with as a part of that. And then in the center in the white, obviously, is the floor plan of the building. So there were some playground modifications as part of this. There's a new playground just to the north of the parking lot, which happens to sit between Holland Middle and Hillcrest Elementary. So that's that tan area there, and then kind of a reconstructed playground area just to the right of the top classroom wing for the floor plan. You can't really see it that well on this site plan, but one of the things that'll be brought up as Mr. Taylor goes through the presentation are some alternates for some of the drop-off areas. So we have some canopy entry points that you'll see when we get to the floor plan. We also have some alternates for some of the courtyard work and for some of the paving. So with the exception of the new paving area on the left-hand side, there are some alternates in there as well for kind of resurfacing of the parking areas. Doug, if you'll just go to this. Looks like it's not proceeding. There we go. The floor plan for each is going to be very similar. There's a new entry point at the bottom of the drawing, which is exactly where the existing entry point is. However, we've expanded the administrative area to allow for it to have a more secure position, the ability to monitor people coming and going in the building. The green in the center of the floor plan is the media center or library as you know it today. There will be a discussion about the idea of potentially modifying the roof structure for that space. You will see in the blue in the kind of right-hand side, just above the green is actually the current dining area, and the blue above it is a completely reconfigured kitchen and serving area with all new equipment. And the reason I bring that up is because the building as a whole is being refitted from bottom to top, systems and finishes. And the intent here is that when you're finished with these two buildings, the Hillcrest and the Richboro projects, that when you walk in there, they feel like they were built today. And a number of you have been through, for example, the latest Rolling Hills renovation. That building feels like a new building inside. That would be exactly what the expectation would be as you walk through these buildings with a new front secure entry and all of the amenities that we've been putting into the projects. Last thing before we go to the next slide. The tan area, kind of just above that blue area that I talked about on the right-hand side, is a new mechanical room area, an electrical area, and that is to accommodate our new air conditioning and heating systems that go into the building to accommodate that. So again, the majority of the money goes into all of the educational spaces. The goal is really to refit each of those so that the kids are sitting in brand new rooms. I'm going to go to the next, yep. So the only difference between Hillcrest and Richboro is that we have done the same thing with trying to separate the car and the bus drop-off. You'll see on the right-hand side there is kind of a new circular drive at the top right-hand corner. The intent of that is that we separate and bring the bus traffic in and out that location. The left-hand side entry will be the entry point for cars. They will go across that kind of single-loaded driveway and loop back around to the main entry. Again, the goal is to try to pull as much traffic as we can off of the roadway and put it right into the site so that we take care of the long queuing lines that we see at so many elementary schools today. The same kinds of amenities will be discussed. The same kinds of alternates will be discussed for this project. And just one more little piece of the puzzle here is you can kind of see a very light gray line snaking up to the top of the drawing from the corner of the building. That's the stairway to the athletic fields. So there's a discussion that we'll have quickly about refitting that stairway because right now it's a series of timbers, and the goal would be to make it a real stairway for accessibility. Floor plan, same exact floor plan, same discussion points as the last building.
So I want to start with the results before we go over the details of each one of these projects. And I think it's important just to understand, as Dr. Fraser said, we're going to talk about each one individually. There's the Holland Elementary School project, which had a construction document, 90% budget at about $22.9 million. The bids came in at 17.6 roughly, with soft cost 21.1 for a project, under budget by about $1.8 million. Richboro Elementary School, again, had a budget of about 23.8. Bids came in at 18.3. With soft cost, we are at 21.5 million. We are under budget on Richboro by about $2.3 million. When you look at the combined bid, and I have to say, I give credit to Andy Block. We sat in a facilities meeting and we talked about if we should consider a combined bid. And I said, in my 35 years of doing this, I've never seen savings combining bids. And he said, well, listen, if it's not too much of a burden, why don't we try it? I talked to my team and they were happy to consider that alternative. So we put together the alternative bid, and sure enough, for the first time in my experience, and I think Arif and David might say the same, we saw savings as a result of the combined bid, and up to a tune of about 1.6 million. When you add the two lows, you're about $5.8 million under budget with the combined bid approach. So thank you, Andy, and congratulations to the board for that foresight. Soul Finestone Elementary School came in just slightly over the budget by about $200,000. The $31.5 million budget, we're about 31.7. Again, the savings on those other projects are so extraordinary that they overshadow the success of the Soul Finestone project. When you budget 31.5 and you're within $200,000, that's really a job well done in the bid world. But because we're not $6 million under budget, it feels bad, but it really isn't. It's a real good number, especially for a multi-year phased complex project such as Soul Finestone. South Turf came in about 110,000 rather, under budget. And the tennis court alternate to that came in about $485,000 under our budgeted amount. So we've seen very favorable bid results on these projects, and we really just did it in time, based upon where this bid climate has gone, based upon the skyrocketing of material cost. We bid these at the very beginning of the escalation of those materials, and we can talk more about that a little later. But just a summary of those projects, you can see combined about $6.1 million under budget, this whole packet of projects that we put out to bid. So I know we're going to debate with the challenges of financing and whatnot, but congratulations is really in order for good numbers for us as a team. I'm not going to go over, I'm sorry? I'm going to go over that in just a minute, yep, because that's important to note. We have some significant contingencies in addition to the savings that we've realized, and I have those specific numbers. I'm not going to go through all the bid forms. These are the forms that we use to record the bids when we open them. But important to note for Hillcrest and Richboro, we had 3 general contractors out of the about 35 that were at the mandatory pre-bid. We had 3 general contractors that bid. Unfortunately, the first general contractor's bid was late, so we could not open their bid. But we did have Penn Builders and Skepton Construction as our 2 general contractors. And Penn Builders has worked in this district on the new Newtown Middle School. They built it. They built Rolling Hills, and they built Wrightstown. And they were eager to come back and work with us again. They did not have work lined up for next year. They were aggressively coming after this. Skepton Construction came in with a plan to bid just the combined bid project, and they came in and threw an extraordinary number at it and knocked Penn Builders out, or Penn Builders likely would have been the low, regardless of who was bidding. And that's really true when you look at the other bids, who are the other contractors that are being potentially awarded the projects. They are all contractors that are currently working or have worked for the district. So we have a following of contractors. I won't go through all of these, but you can see we had significant competition in all the other categories throughout the bid process, and these are rather lengthy. This document is not meant to be read here because it's just too much information, but I just want to show you when we look at the numbers that follow this, when we talk about soft cost, all of these line items on the budget are included in those soft costs. So we talk about fees and contingency being in soft costs, but it's all of the items that we have in a long laundry list of costs that are included in that number. The top piece are the construction numbers. And I'll give you a legible copy of this when we send you information through board docs down the road. But for example, Hillcrest Elementary bids, you can see the actual low bids, Penn Builders, Tri-County, Borough, and MICO, and the alternates that were selected, the bid amount, and that it is the number of 1.8 million under budget. I'm not going to spend time reviewing all these. You know the numbers. An example, though, then we look at the soft cost, and that's when we get to the $21.1 million number when you take the construction and the soft cost. And as Andy was speaking about, that project alone, Hillcrest, being 1.8 million under budget, includes $2.6 million in contingencies on top of it. So there are monies for furniture, fixture, and equipment, monies for construction contingency, the project allowance for the contractors, utility allowances, and those are monies that, if not fully expended, are returned to the district. So we have been successful in coming to you at the end of our projects with credit change orders for unused allowance. I think you might remember that from most projects, and we would work just as hard to do that on any one or all of these projects. This is the breakdown of the next project, which is 2.3 under budget, and the same soft cost, and again, $2.6 million in this project for allowances. And the last combined bid, without going through all those details, there are $5.2 million in contingencies in the combined bid, in furniture, fixture, equipment, construction contingency, the prime contractors' allowances, and utility allowances. So there's very good funding in place for these projects built within each project. This is just an overview of the total cost of each one of those projects. And then I think where we really want to head is where what recommended alternates are included in these bids. Now, Dr. Fraser, you mentioned you wanted to look at the individual projects and combined. Should I just go over the combined bid alternates to save
Yes.
time?
Thanks, Doug.
Yep. So I'm going to just move forward to the combined bid. So these are the same list of alternates for any one of these bid process, but this includes both projects. So when you're looking at the number on the right, keep in mind that that applies to two projects. It's not a single project. So the numbers that we're recommending, the alternate numbers, number one is unclassified rock excavation. And basically, that's an insurance that we know is a good number. It's about $25,000 per project. And the contractor excavates any rock the general contractor, electrical, or plumbing contractor would encounter is removed at their cost. If we accept this alternate, they agree to remove rock based on the number that they've provided in their bid. It's unclassified, they own it, whatever they hit, any quantities, any boulders, it's for them to remove. If you don't accept this and they hit rock, then you have to quantify it, load it in a truck, have it hauled off site, and based on the geotechnical reports and what we believe to be some rocky sites, we feel that this is a good insurance to take based on the numbers that we're seeing. The second alternate for about $25,000 per building is the courtyard restoration. This is not a full-fledged courtyard project. This is more of cleaning them up, putting some materials in there that are sustainable around the building walls and restoring some sidewalks and things. Nothing over the top. But to do this later after the building is complete is very difficult and far more expensive. Doing it as part of the project, they can take doors off, drive equipment through the building, into the courtyard, do the work, and drive the equipment out. Alternate 4 is mill and overlay the existing parking lots. Richboro Elementary School's parking lot is in very, very poor condition. It really needs to be milled and overlaid. That would be addressed as part of the project. And as David Schrader said, we would do the same at the Hillcrest in the front parking lot when the project's complete. In the base bid, we included new metal panels around the exterior of the building where it's currently a stucco material. We're going to take the credit to delete those metal panels, and in the bid, we own the cleaning, repair, and refinishing of those stucco panels. So we'll paint those panels with an elastomeric paint that will last a significant amount of time and give us a nice clean finish on those. Roofing materials, this is just an alternate to go from a 20-year roof to a 30-year roof for $12,000 per building. It's really a no-brainer based on the low cost of this number. It comes down to cents a square foot versus dollars a square foot down the road. Recommending deleting the canopy for the bus loop. We don't have many schools with canopies at the bus loops. We do at parent drop-offs, but not at bus loops. So we're recommending taking the credit of $323,000 to not build the canopy. And we're recommending taking the credit of $690,000 to not bump up the roof over the library. As nice as that is, we have it at Holland Middle School. We did it at the Rolling Hills project. Those are inbound areas that have no natural light, so that roof provides you some daylight monitoring with windows around the edge. But we do have a one-sided window with a sloped roof on the library. So we do have some natural daylighting in there, so it's just not worth it at this time based on the number of projects and finances to do that scope. The alternate floor finish is basically going into both of those schools, taking out in the hallways all of the quarry tile floors. There's also a quarry tile base that runs up the wall. The contractor, under this price for both buildings, takes that base off the block, takes the floor out from the quarry from the concrete floor, prepares the floor, prepares the walls, puts in new 2x2 quartz tile floors like we've done in the new classrooms. The larger tile, it's a heavy-duty tile. It's an elementary school, so terrazzo would be great, but the quarry tile, or the quartz tile in an elementary school is certainly suitable and gets us new floor finishes and base throughout both hallways. We did have an alternate to put tile wainscoting, tile similar to the wood that you see around this room, up to about 5 feet, but out of ceramic tile, not wood. But the walls are already block, so what you don't get is a new finish on the walls. What you do get is patching the walls anywhere we have to do any kind of work, prepping those and painting the walls. So they'll have a fresh paint, but you may see areas that are patched when the project's done. That's what you have to trade off for this alternate. But for a credit of $350,000, and we have sustainable block walls, it makes sense to just paint the walls. The Johnson controls, basically we try to manage the cost of controls. We've had a lot of challenges with packaging controls with equipment companies and numbers going through the roof, but by a bid strategy, we're able to get the controls company we want at a credit to the district. So Johnson Controls is a preferred vendor for us, and for a credit of $95,000, we're happy to get them here at the district. The bipolar ionization, again, is equipment to address the current COVID issues. It's a small unit that gets installed in the mechanical equipment. It also addresses in mitigating mold, pollen, odors. There's other benefits to the system, but it absolutely is beneficial in battling COVID in classrooms and interior spaces. It was not initially recognized by ASHRAE, who was a recognized HVAC society for design standards. It is now. The CDC and ASHRAE are co-referencing one another in regards to bipolar ionization, so I would encourage for $35,000, which is $17,500 per school, adding these units. In fact, we're doing a project for the summer to do this in all the schools so that we can address this indoor air quality issue district-wide. So it's something that we would highly recommend. And alternate 16 is just an alternate piping material for a credit, and the system is very good. It replaces copper piping, but it is a plastic system that we have in other buildings, and it's probably more stable. You won't get the pinholes in it like you do in copper or failed joints. It's a very good system, and it's a credit. And then the alternates we're not recommending just because of budgetary reasons, the outdoor classrooms for $174,000. The stairs that David Schrader mentioned at Richboro Middle, we're recommending keeping those in the project, so we wouldn't accept the credit. So that means they stay in the project, and it replaces some old railroad tie stairs accessing those upper fields with concrete stairs and railings, which I think is a safety issue and something we need to do. This is the canopies at the parent drop-off. We're not recommending deleting the canopies at the parent drop-offs. Those canopies are beneficial for keeping kids dry when they're dropped off, and it also helps us with queuing. Parents tend to pull up and drop off several kids at a time under a canopy. When you don't have the canopy, they tend to wait until they're right in front of the doors to let kids out. It slows things down a bit. The library clear story is just, it should not be carried under this. We are recommending accepting that, so that's just an error in that slide. We are not recommending deleting the classroom casework. There's some additional casework for storage for the kids, for the teachers. We know that storage in an elementary school is at a premium, so this provides about 800 extra linear feet of storage space for teachers. So we're keeping it in the project by not accepting the credit. There was an alternate for a door hardware supplier. It's a credit of $4,000, but there's some issues with potential delivery issues with utilizing that vendor. So we're going to let the contractor use their vendor of choice. The next was just another controls option, but it was an add of $100,000. There were some other options for indoor air quality, but by accepting the bipolar, we would ignore these options. There was another option for piping. It was an add, so we're not going to recommend it. And lastly, the photovoltaic solar array is an alternate just to for bookkeeping, to monitor the cost of that for the LEED Gold process. As you know, these are both LEED Gold buildings. There's an ACE grant, and we have to monitor the cost of that through the process. So this allows us to monitor what the actual cost is and to tell you what the actual value of our grants are by what we're spending from the grant and how much we can reallocate to the actual project itself. And the last is lightning protection. We're not recommending accepting that for an extra $80,000. So at the end of the day, our recommended value-added alternates is about $1.7 million. So that helped us save some significant monies on these projects. So the project achievements, under budget, on schedule. We had nearly 35 contractors in attendance at the mandatory pre-bid, which means the other contractors see the competition, sharpen their pencils, they all go after it. We've included the value-added alternates. Energy efficient building envelope, HVAC systems for ongoing energy savings. We'll have the solar panels, which will provide, I think, roughly 50% of the power for that building. Is that right, Arif? Okay, thank you.
It's slightly less than that. but-
Slightly less.
Yeah.
All right. These would be our 4th and 5th LEED Gold certified schools in the district. The ACE grants contributing over $820,000 each to these projects to offset the LEED cost. Oh, there it is, 36%. So we are providing the AC for these buildings, which they don't have, so air conditioning both buildings and the indoor air quality issues, and certainly in full compliance with ASHRAE regulations and CDC. Life safety issues, site improvements, the separation of parent and buses, the combined bid savings of $5.8 million roughly, and the 5.2 in contingencies, and some other costs that aren't necessarily in those numbers but are real numbers. By renovating these buildings, moving these students and staff to the Richboro Middle School, condensing this project from 2 years to 1, not having a phased project with modular trailers. We're looking at about a $2 million savings for modulars by not putting them at those two buildings for those projects, and probably another $500,000 in overhead and profit extended for the extended time the contractor would have to be on site, the mobilization for another year. So, those are real monies that you're saving by doing what we're doing. So you start taking all that into consideration, that 5.8 is really more like 8.3. And the 5.2 on top of it, it's numbers that I can say I will likely never be sitting in front of you and sharing with you again. I just can't believe the success we've had here. Hillcrest Elementary School, these are just the professional fees that are included in the project budget, but numbers that we had to get for balancing the HVAC system, to certify the lead process, the construction testing, to make sure that we're tracking and measuring, for example, footing bottoms to make sure the ground's stable, steel connections to make sure they comply, concrete mixes to make sure it's the strength that we're looking for. They'll track all of that work. Revolution Recovery is dealing with the recycling process for the dumpsters. Our professional fees, which were previously approved, which again are included in the fees, enhanced commissioning for lead. These are all contracts that will come forward to you for these projects. Moving services, I put a bid out to move the Star Center from the Richboro Middle School into the new Star Center in July, and to move the Hillcrest Elementary School students from Hillcrest into the former Richboro Middle School. So those costs are $58,000, $59,000 roughly. And then there's just a Plan Con approval process. Richboro has the same professional fees, pretty much the same people for testing, professional fees. So these, again, are all contracts that if these move forward, Mr. Solomon will be signing a lot of documents or docu-signing a lot of documents. As far as the next steps, the approval process or the rejection process, depending on what you decide, needs to happen at the April 8th meeting. The delivery of materials, procuring materials has become extraordinarily challenging. It's important that we get all of our product submittals in. The architect and his team, David and his team, review those submittals, and we get these processed and get the materials ordered so we can get delivery of equipment, long lead items, as soon as we can. The project for Hillcrest is as it's been this summer of 21, completing in July of 22, and Richboro starting in July of 22 and finishing in July of 23. Now, what happens with the combined bid process, and the reason we get some savings out of that, is the contractor wants to order the materials for both of those projects together. So we will provide an area at Richboro Middle. We'll carve out the grass area, put some stone in, some trailers, fence it in, make it safe, and they will take delivery of materials and store them on site. So the first couple months we'll take delivery, and then when they're ready to start that project, the contractors will be ready to go with a bit of parts, just go in and replicate what they just finished the year before. So Sol Finestone, David, would you like to?
Sure. So I think we probably last presented this to you about a year and a half ago, and it's been interesting because we've been working with the township for the entire last year to get the approvals in place. The site plan is, you can see kind of the O-shaped building in the upper left-hand corner. That's the current shape of the existing building with the library in the lower left-hand corner of the building. The gymnasium or multi-purpose room, as you know, yep, Doug has the pointer, so that helps. That gymnasium, that's the cafeteria and multi-purpose spaces in the front part of the building, and the gym is in the very back. There is a classroom wing that goes off the right-hand side, but what we would be doing is adding 2 stories of classroom wings, which is what Doug's pointing to right now. Now, it's very important to the project that that's part of the project because that becomes the swing space for this building, which stays occupied. And we'll get into the floor plan in a moment. You can see how that works. The intent here is similar to every other project that the team has worked on with you, and that is to create a separate bus and car drop-off. So Doug is pointing to the bus drop-off loop and new parking area with staff parking on the right. That would be supporting that bus side of the thing. And the other driveway is the parent drop-off driveway, and that comes up essentially right in front of the main office, so the main office can monitor parent drop-offs. Important to the bus drop-off area is that kind of island that sticks down between these two parking lots we just talked about. That's kind of a collector island, and there's a new entry point right at the top of that that becomes the area where the students exit the buses and come into the building. So that's essentially the makeup of this. You will remember that this site also has on-site septic, which we will be upgrading, repairing, improving, and also water, if I remember correctly, which we will be taking care of as well. Same, if we can go to the floor plan, Doug, we can talk briefly about. So this is turned 90 degrees to the right, and so you see the gymnasium complex in orange on the right-hand side, and then on the lower left-hand side, you can see the dining and multi-purpose space again. What we're doing there is expanding the kitchen and redoing it as we've done with all of the buildings. In each of the cases where you have an existing kitchen, all of those kitchens have such old equipment and are so small that they're not providing the level of service that a new facility would. So in this case, it's an expansion of the kitchen and providing all new equipment. What this project does, in addition to the new classrooms that we're adding, is to right-size all of the spaces within. And one of the anomalies to this building that you may or may not know is that so many of the classrooms are so many different sizes. And so the lower classroom wing that comes directly from the, I'm going to go up next to the gymnasium, Doug, that wing, a lot of the partitions in between the classrooms get reconfigured to allow all of those classrooms to be a very similar size throughout the building. And so that sets it up so that we can actually create grade structures within the building, and all of the grade structures have similar classroom sizes. The very bottom of the drawing below the green is the new bus entry. And at the very top where you see the library in light orange, we expand that to be kind of a library plus a computer plus kind of science technology space as well as part of the building. And then we gather all of the specials in the middle, in the purple and the blue, and those take care of providing for shorter distances in the building for students to come to those special areas. And I guess very last, and I don't know whether Arif and Doug want to add to this, but this project will be a phased project. And so that classroom wing that you see that's sort of a V shape, that's the new construction. It's a 2-story construction piece. We have to build that first and provide all the utilities into the building directly adjacent to that. That then becomes the swing space to allow us to start to move around the building and renovate each of the portions of the building as we go. So again, same as the other buildings. It will have updated exteriors to some extent. It will also have completely new interiors so that when people walk into that building, it will feel like a brand new building. Also brand new systems, all new power, all new heating, and air conditioning, as well as those septic and water systems that I talked about earlier.
And I think what I would add is it shows a 13 classroom addition, but as David said, there are spaces inside that are substandard size. So by enlarging those spaces, it displaces those programs. That's why we add 13 classrooms. But the bottom line is we're adding 5 classrooms to this building. So it's not a net gain of 13, it's a net gain of 5. It's just a 13 classroom addition. And that addition, creatively as a team, we were looking at, should we put a modular campus on this building the first summer, kids start school on that modular campus, and then we can start renovating the building? Or can we put that money that we would have spent on modulars into this addition and phase it after this addition is done? So it was a value analysis, a value engineering process for our team, and we saved likely around $1 million or so by not building the modulars and putting that money back into something that we benefit by. So, it's a good approach that we took, and it keeps kids out of modulars as well.
Doug, if I could add, the only other thing I would add is, number one, all three buildings, we're also addressing ADA. This particular building also has some challenges with ADA that are being addressed. All three buildings are also getting fully sprinkled from a safety standpoint. And the last thing, I know David mentioned it, but from an HVAC standpoint, especially in today's environment, all three buildings are getting a very robust, sophisticated, and well-ventilated HVAC system. The two buildings we saw before are actually getting a VAV system, because we're able to execute a VAV system, which is a fully ducted system like we have at the middle school. This one is getting new unit ventilators, again, with a much more robust system put in place. And the utilities on this building are one of the biggest challenges we have. That corral in the back there, all of the utilities, services that come in there are at their last legs, and they're going to need to be replaced. That is a major issue on this site is water, sewer systems, our on-site septic and sewers, and those are all being upgraded as well. Is that not coming through? Okay, sorry. So that's all I had to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif.
If I may, before we move off this chart, and this question is for Dr. Frazier, because it's educational, not building. My ears perked up when I saw science and technology wing section, whatever that yellowish color is in the top corner. Do all our buildings have that? You know me and parity.
I should probably correct that, and I'm sorry, Dr. Frazier, it's David again. It is more of a computer space, but as you guys see an evolution at some point, of course, you can adapt some of these opportunities in the different buildings.
No, I
You want to chime in?
appreciate that from Mr. Schrader, because the answer is no. We don't have separate science and tech space, and that really hasn't been programmed into this building either.
Okay.
So, thanks, Mr. Schrader.
Okay. So again, on the bid process, we had a couple bidders. We had three. The one bidder was disqualified because his bid was late, again, on this project, so sadly, we can't open it, we can't accept it. But we have two general contractors that bid this. One was Penn Builders, who didn't get the Hillcrest Richboro the couple weeks before, so they were sharpening their pencil coming after this project very hard. They wanted to get this project because they frankly want to line projects up for next year, and they haven't up to the point of this project. And Lobar bid this project, and Lobar was our general contractor at Holland Middle School, and Lobar is our general contractor at the Star Center. And they wanted to continue to work with us, and they came in and they were aggressive, and they beat Penn Builders again on this project. So they would be the low bidder, and a favorable number from them. The rest of the primes were competitive as well. We had a couple numbers for environmental. At the end of the day, when you review the construction numbers, as I said, it's Lobar, who's worked with us before, is working with us now. Borough Developers has been our electrician on almost every project we've done. They're also mechanical contractors. I've worked with them on the Souderton High School project. So Borough would be low bid for electrical and mechanical. And Stan Rock Plumbing has worked with us before. They would be the low bid for plumbing. And Sargent has done many projects for us with abatement. They worked with us at the Goodnow Elementary School and helped us with a lot of the trailer, when we used to have modular trailers here with my annual summer cleanups. They were here. So we have a lot of experience with Sargent. They're very good at what they do. This project, when you look at the construction contracts, it's about $559,000 over the estimated construction budget. But when you adjust the soft cost fees accordingly, you're at about $31.7 million. So you're $216,000 over the projected budget at the construction documentation phase. This project, like others, also has contingencies of $2.3 million. We have $800,000 for furniture, fixture, and equipment. We have a $600,000 construction contingency. In the contractor's bids is $826,000 of allowances and utility allowances. So again, we have ample contingencies in place to cover us during the construction process, with the goal, as always, to return as many of those dollars back as we can. So the alternate recommendations on this project, the unclassified rock excavation, again, is a favorable number when you add the three, that's 41,000 is for three different contractors added up, so that's not one single person. The engineered structural fill, as we said, this first phase of getting utilities in and getting this classroom wing completed is critical to the success of this project. We have to have those 13 classrooms finished after the first year to maintain the phasing of the project. That is something that we've planned for. We have milestone dates. We can monitor this. We can track it. We're ready to go. We have the plan, and we have the right proposed team to do the work. This team is our movers and shakers, and they'll get this thing done. The engineered structural fill will provide us with 26 inches of crushed stone where the new addition is being built. They take out the soil, they replace it with stone. This allows the construction to continue when it rains. There's no excuses that it's too muddy, we can't work on the site. When they have to scratch out and put underslab utilities in and do other work, they move the stone, they put the utilities in, they put the stone back, and they recompact it. When that's soil and people are disturbing it over and over again, there becomes challenges for compaction, for settlement of buildings later. This provides us with a sound structural pad down the road. So there's a lot of benefits to this, schedule being a great benefit as well. There was a clear story over the classroom wing, some light monitors to allow some additional light in there in the new addition. But because the front of that two-story addition is all glass, we feel that there'll be enough natural light coming into that space that it was worth taking the credit to not build that. This again has casework. We're recommending accepting the additional casework for storage space for the elementary school. There is an alternate to take the quarry tile floors out of this building and put in the quartz tile again. We're recommending doing that here. There's a credit again to take the controls company of our choice, which we'll gladly do for a credit of $40,000. There's a credit for the piping systems I talked about before. And there's the bipolar ionization for the entire building of $55,000. So we're not recommending sod in lieu of grass. We're not recommending the outdoor classroom. We're not recommending adding a second canopy over the gym entrance. There's a cleaning the exterior masonry. That's something we believe we can work out during construction. It's $24,000. We'd rather not accept it now. If we have money later, we can take care of something like that. There's an option to put ornamental fencing in along the basin along Eagle Road. We own a split rail and wire fencing system around the basin, which will protect students from entering a basin, and it will do its job without spending an additional $40,000. There's a credit to delete the tile wainscoting in this building, but on this project, we're recommending keeping it in. And this tile on this project is where we have new drywall walls. So wherever we have in a hallway a new gypsum wall board, it's a high traffic drywall, but it still gets abused by kids. I mean, it's just traffic itself and brushing it and scratching against it. They would have tile in front of it to protect the wall. So we're going to recommend keeping it on this project. Lightning protection we would not recommend, and the other indoor air quality numbers we're not recommending. And on this project, there was an ad to go with the alternative hardware supplier, so we're not recommending it. So the net result is a credit of $41,600 for these alternates on this project. So the project achievements on this, again, we had about 35 contractors in attendance at the mandatory pre-bid. We had good competition. There's the value-added alternates we talked about. There's the energy efficiencies in this building, similar to what we're putting in at the other schools, minus the solar voltaic. There's no solar on this project, but all of the other efficiencies are here. We're replacing the antiquated, dated, obsolete MEP systems in this building. That's mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. We're firing boilers in this building from, they're 32 and 52-year-old boilers. So they're fired on number 2 fuel oil with an above-ground tank outside. We'd be replacing that with efficient propane-fired boilers. We'd have a corral of propane tanks, so we'd have efficient systems. Those propane tanks would also provide fuel to the kitchen, for the kitchen equipment and the hot water heaters. So we'd have high-efficiency propane-fired boilers, hot water heaters, and equipment. We'd get new building controls, LED lighting, and replace all of the antiquated items. The electrical system in this building is extraordinarily tired. It's at full capacity. We put in maybe 50% of the classrooms with supplemental air conditioning units to satisfy some occupants. There's just not an ability to plug in one more unit in this building. So we would take care of that electrical system with the new service from the street. Certainly air conditioning, again, is part of this with the ventilation and the bipolar that we talked about. We have a program that meets the educational specifications here. We're removing all the asbestos environmental remediation of the building. We're improving the failing on-site water and sewer systems, as we talked about, updating the life safety systems, putting a fire protection system in, as Arif mentioned. The bid includes over $2.3 million in allowances and contingencies, and we talked about the $1 million savings by building the addition, and we just narrowly escaped this sudden increase in material costs. We were at the very front end of that increase, and they're continuing to escalate, I believe. And this project also includes the same professional fees the other project did. It's a different group of people, but there's testing, adjusting, balancing for HVAC, construction testing, architectural fees, plan con document, and the schedule that we would, again, look for a decision at the April 8th board meeting, groundbreaking for site in May. And this runs basically through October of 2024 to get this building totally complete. Another item that I didn't mention that does affect the cost is the library roof. This building has, I think part of the history of this Sol Finestone facility is the library. And we certainly didn't want to take that library down. But the roof itself is not in great shape. It's not at risk of failing. It's not coming down. But it has some serious deflection in the roof. So it needs to be replaced as part of the project. We're replacing that roof. So we're opening the library to blue sky, putting a whole new roof system on top of the existing laminated beams that are in there. We're saving the beams and the stone walls and the windows around the top, the clear story windows. But that added some cost to this project as well that wasn't anticipated. And the last but not least is the South Turf project. I think you're familiar with this. And the alternate is to basically reconstruct the tennis and basketball courts. These, unfortunately, do not have suitable under drainage. We have a lot of groundwater that's causing failure of these courts from below grade. And this project would include keeping the fencing system where it is, keeping the lights, taking some of the fencing out of the end, gaining access, taking out what's there, putting in new under drainage, putting in new stone subbase, and building new courts and all-weather surfaces on those at the end. We had good bid competition. We had 3 very serious bidders on this project for the turf itself, for the field itself. B. Blair is the apparent low bidder. B. Blair is the site contractor who does much work in our area. You've probably seen their trucks, but they did a really nice job for us on Newtown Middle. They were the site contractor there. Very good contractor. We had 2 electricians that bid the electrical scope, the site lighting, the stadium lights, and pulling power for this project, which happens to come from the other end of the long, elongated South High School. So the end that we really wanted the power doesn't have it. They have to go all the way down the hallway, above the ceilings, pull power through the hallways, out the opposite end to get power to the fields. But it provides us with sufficient power for the master plan stadium as well. So down the road, if some other board decides to do something bigger if the project were to move and wanted to go to phase 2, that ability would be there from day 1. So as you can see from the bids, we were about $620,000 under budget for construction bids And the one item that took it to 594 is there's a $25,000 fee for construction testing. So we added construction testing for eyes and ears in the field to monitor the soils analysis and infiltration testing and things like that during the construction. So $594,000 under budget. That includes our recommendation for a lit walkway that connects the ends of the building across that end of the site on the back side of the field. And like the other projects, we have a construction contingency for this as well. We have $100,000 in contingency for the turf, about $66,000 for tennis combined. Project allowances of $100,000, $266,000 in total. And this is just outlining what it is. So the sidewalk and tennis courts, and lighting and the lighting for the sidewalk from the electrician. These bids are about $47,000 less than the bids we saw last year for this project. So we came in under the cost of last year's bid. And I talked about the alternates, reconstructing the tennis basketball courts for about $1 million. It was estimated at 1.5. And the paved walkway with lights for $63,000, which is a really good value. Didn't recommend alternative turf types, didn't recommend getting rid of the ball netting system that protects the students on the field. Didn't recommend alternative lighting. We did bid 3 different stadium light manufacturers, so there was competition. This wasn't just given to Musco Lighting, but Musco Lighting is the basis of design, and they have a 25-year lamp replacement warranty on those lights. They basically warrant those for 25 years. They'll come out and replace any lamp that fails in that time. And it's remotely controlled by cell phone or a computer as well. So we had 7 site contractors, 2 electrical contractors. At the bid, we had good competition. There's a lot of good reasons to consider this. It does provide parity between north and south. And we had a bid savings of $594,000 and a $266,000 allowance. And that really does cover it. There's some professional services, the $25,000 for construction testing. And this schedule would be, again, some decision at the April 8th meeting. Groundbreaking would be May 3rd, and it would conclude in October of 21. And I'll finish where I started. This is
Anybody have any questions on South Project? I have one simple one. Mr. Taylor, is those tennis courts the only ones at South? In other words, are those the ones that are used for PIAA competition?
They are, yes. They are.
Okay. Thank you.
With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Stone for the financial piece of this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. So there are many possible scenarios to look at when you think about the combinations of different bids to accept or not, but that's obviously difficult to analyze all on one slide. So we're looking at just a few scenarios, and just recognize that there are other ones that are not on the screen that we can certainly evaluate with your direction. So let me first orient you to what you are looking at. You see gray bars going across here. These are the fiscal years going across the bottom. Those gray bars are the amount of our annual debt service budget. So that number is $18.8 million. So the model assumes that same $18.8 million going out for the entirety of the term that we've been using, which takes us to the 45-46 fiscal year. The light blue line at the bottom here, which I give my shaky hand, is our existing debt service, assuming nothing else no other project is added to our current debt portfolio. So obviously that decreases down to zero. That's not a realistic or reasonable assumption. As a public school district, public entity, we are not going away. So there will be a need to continue to do work. So it just helps you to kind of see what the overall trajectory of debt service is. And there are a few natural drops in the debt service in certain years as you progress along. So when our debt service, our future borrowings are constructed, they're built to match up as best as possible with those natural fall-offs, and we structure the debt accordingly. We refer to the difference between the gray bar, the top of the gray bar, and the blue line as our capacity. So that's a difference between what our budget is and what we would pay, again, all other things equal. And that amount of money in any given year translates into a total amount of money that we can borrow over time. So we look at that capacity, basically that space above the blue line, as what we can borrow. So we also, in analyzing all of these scenarios, we use the following assumptions. We use the assumption that there is no capitalized interest in any of these scenarios, in any of these options. And I'll explain a little bit more about how the capitalized interest would work if it were a tool that we were to utilize. There's also no extension to the length of the borrowings. So there's nothing beyond 2046. But there are three ways that you can move that gray box to be able to accommodate the project costs. You can increase the gray bar, which would be an increase to the annual budget, and you can do that in any given year or over the entirety of the term. You can move the term out, meaning you can extend beyond 45, 46, or you can take, by way of future borrowings, you can take some of the project costs and push them out into future years where capacity exists. And that's the concept of capitalized interest, and we'll come back to that. So the first step that we did is now having actual bid results. We plugged those numbers into the financial model to determine whether they're, what the difference is between what we expected when we modeled this based on budgeted figures versus what's actually now available from the bid results. So you see the orange line is what we refer to as the base case. So that's the top line there. So that assumption is all of the projects are approved on the schedule that's been presented. So that would mean approval of the Hillcrest, Richboro, Sulfinestone, and turf projects. It also includes, if you'll recall back to our discussions of a year ago, the base case scenario also includes about $22 million to cover deferred CIP projects, deferred summer maintenance projects that had accumulated over time. And it also includes borrowing for the MBIT project. So that's included in that base case scenario. So what you're seeing in this base case is, again, this, just for orientation, this is the current fiscal year, this first year, and then this is the next year. The second bar is the bar that is the year that we are budgeting for right now, or for next year's budget. So the debt service budget increases in the base case by the amounts in this light blue table. Okay, so look at the top line, base case. The 21-22 budget increases by $451,000. The 22-23 budget increases by $1.1 million. And the 23-24 budget increases by $2.6 million. So that takes the peak debt service payment in 23-24 to $21.4 million. Now we are right now we're at $18.8 million, so that's an increase over what we're currently paying. So if you think about this another way, if we were to follow that path, that trajectory, the $8.1 million budget deficit that I presented last week at Finance Committee would need to increase to $8.5 million. And again, assuming that is the deficit inclusive of a full Act 1 real estate tax increase. So I mentioned capitalized interest, and that is a tool that can be used to mitigate the impact of these spikes above capacity. So essentially what happens in capitalized interest is you take the borrowings that are causing the spike here, and you push them out into future years. So in order to do that, you are borrowing additional funds to pay for that structure, because the bondholders are going to require greater interest payments because they are going to be giving up their money for longer. So you're adding more money to purchase that increase, and you're pushing it out into the future years. So you flatten out the spike here, but you also increase the orange line in the out years. So it would be up a little higher, more costly in the future years. Those numbers for capitalized interest you see are in yellow here. So this is the all-in cost for capitalized interest. So the base case would be $6.6 million of capitalized interest. So that's the actual capitalized interest itself, the interest payments that you're pushing out into the future, plus the fact that you're now paying additional interest on top of that. So that's the all-in number. That's everything for your comparison purposes. That concept of capitalized interest is universal. It applies to all of the scenarios that you're seeing. So anywhere you see a spike in the early years, you can use capitalized interest to push out those spikes, and you increase the future year borrowings. So we developed various scenarios based on the project. It's, again, not an inclusive list of what can be done, but it is just an example of what can be done to just show the impact of what different decisions might have. So the first scenario is the yellow line, and you're going to probably not be able to hit it exactly right here. You're okay. Is that scenario removes the borrowing for the turf project and removes the borrowing for the deferred CIP project. So about $22.5 million comes out of the overall borrowing plan. So the other projects continue in that scenario, but you take out those two projects. The third scenario is in dark blue, and it's very close together here. It is the approval of the joint bid for Hillcrest and Richboro Elementary. So again, that's about that's $41 million. So that number's right there. And as you can see, the impact is decreasing because you're borrowing less money. So that spike is still coming in above our current budget, meaning we still need to have an increase, but it's been lessened. And then the last scenario is Soul Finestone only, which is the green bar. Again, very similar in total dollar amounts to the combined project of Hillcrest and Richboro. So the table up top shows you those budgetary impacts in the blue table. So what would be the necessary budget increase in each of these years over the gray bar? And then the alternative scenario is utilizing capitalized interest. So again, this blue table shows you what the annual budget would have to increase. You could also use fund balance or cash to fund those spikes, one-time use of funds, or you have the capitalized interest. So right now, the district has capacity in its current budget for about $24 million of borrowing. So we could go out to market for $24 million soon and be able to borrow that amount of money and not have to increase our annual debt service payment. The $18.8 million would not have to increase, and we would not have to use capitalized interest. So that presents two options that you could do within that $24 million. Again, this is not a project-related calculation. This is a financing calculation. So you could approve all or some of the projects in any combination as you were so inclined, and you'd ostensibly be making a down payment towards that group of projects. So for the sake of discussion, if you approved Hillcrest, Richboro joint bid, and Feinstone, your first borrowing could happen immediately for $24 million, and we would need to borrow almost immediately because if you'll recall, our decision to move forward with the CR Star Center was to utilize existing bond monies, and we had just enough to get through. So we're running low on existing bond monies. We don't have much left to be able to carry us. We need to have a new borrowing. That down payment you're making, again, you're approving projects, so you can't simply just pay $24 million for the projects you approved. You have to pay what was bid. So there would have to be further discussion and further approval of the additional funds in whatever amount those would be to continue to do those projects, right? So you're simply pushing off that financing decision until a later date, but you're getting the $24 million now to be able to get the work started on the timeline so that you can finish at the point where we need to get students back into the schools. So there's some advantages to that. You get economies of scale with a bond refinancing opportunity that we have. So given our budget situation, I am recommending that we move forward with a refinancing to reap some operational savings and help decrease that $18.8 million annual payment in the next year's budget. And when you add new money to that, you're paying your professionals one time. You're not doing separate borrowings, separate transactions. You're able to pay your professionals at that time. The delay in the decision on how much more to get allows the time to do more planning around our overall budget picture, to develop a philosophy and a policy around use of capitalized interest, around our overall debt load, to get a better sense of what the future might hold. Because these graphs here are only the present projects that we've discussed tonight. This doesn't include anything that may need to happen in the future. So as we look to the next phase, those buildings that are going to be coming due, reaching the end of life cycle on systems and reaching 30 years of age, those projects are not yet included. And in order to have the capacity to do those projects, decisions need to be made with respect to the annual budget payment or the term of the borrowing. So those questions about the rectangle, the gray rectangle that we're in, can be made. What's new to the discussion, or recent to the discussion, is the availability of ESSER funds, which are the stimulus funds from the federal government. And there needs to be a lot of planning at the administration level about how the district is going to use ESSER funds in order to have the most impact on our educational program as well as our overall financial picture, because this is a significant amount of money that we've not seen from the federal government in quite a while. And we have a fairly long runway to plan those funds. The funds are to be spent by September 30th, 2023. So it can be a multiple fiscal year planning exercise, which fortunately gives us the opportunity to really be strategic in how we use those funds. So we would want to layer that into the discussion. Although the ESSER 3 funds have been, the American Rescue Plan, which is generating the ESSER 3 funds, has been approved at the federal level, we have not yet seen our final allocation. So we don't even know what the number is. We've seen estimates, but we don't know exactly what some of the strings are going to be, because we're hearing about having set-asides for learning loss and summer school activities that would be a factor in how we utilize those funds. So again, I'll mention you've got to pay for what gets approved. You can't just simply pay for $24 million and hope that the contractors will be okay with that. They won't be. We have to pay them what they bid. So you also risk, for anything that doesn't get approved, you have bid risk and you have interest rate risk. And those are defined as, bid risk is what you've heard the folks here talk about is supply costs, availability of contractors. Those are unknowns in the future. Those costs right now are going up, and so we cannot predict what's going to happen. We just don't know what happens on bid day. It's always a wild card when you open up those bids. Interest rates are also a wild card because we don't know where they are going to go. And so the longer you wait to borrow, the more sensitivity there is to rates going up or down. They can go obviously in either direction and impact project costs. If it costs more money to go out for bonds, then that has a negative impact on our ability to do projects. But if rates remain low, then we still have flexibility. The second way to use that $24 million and stay within the existing framework that we have is to approve projects that fit within that $24 million. So that could be a combination of Hillcrest and turf or Richboro and turf. Now it's really close. If you just go by the bid numbers, we're above that $24 million. So it would be very, very tight. But that gives you, it's the same concept that you're approving. You would approve those projects. The difference is you're locked in now, and you know that though you're not technically based on the bids, you're not exactly under budget, you're pretty darn close. You are able to get the economies of scale with the refunding. You're able to only pay your professionals once. You still have time to do the planning that I talked about around ESSER, around capitalized interest, around overall debt management. You still have bid and interest rate risk, though, because this assumes if you only approve a certain subset of projects, those other projects are not going away, and they have to be factored back into our plan, and so you have that bid risk and that interest rate risk moving into the future years. That is what I have as far as financing. It's a lot of information, but I'm happy to take questions when the time is appropriate. I know Mr. Taylor has more to present.
Mr. Dago.
Well, thank you, everybody, for this very informative and full of information presentation here. But Bill, Mr. Stone, I'll ask you, what are the risks of doing the job? Because I see you just said the risks of not doing these jobs. What financial risks do you see us in going forward with all of the projects?
The risks are that we would exceed our current budget capacity. We would need to either increase the budget, or in the immediate term, we would need to increase the budget for debt service by $451,000, or make a decision to utilize capitalized interest to the tune of $6.6 million. So that $6.6 million, unfortunately, eats into the good results that we received on bid day. It's kind of an offsetting cost. So if the board desired to approve all the projects, which we would all love to see every one of these projects get approved for our kids, you'd be looking at the orange line here. So we would have to figure out a way to fund the amounts on the top row in that blue table.
2.6 million in 2 years would be on top of all the other issues or financial things we have to tackle. One other question, since this chart is up, looking at the yellow line that shows a decrease in the amount available, increases the gray funding area if we drop the turf, which is like $3 million, just from a graphic standpoint, it looks like it's $2 million a year, and I'm probably not understanding the chart, but for a $2 million project, seems on a chart to make a significant, opens up a lot of debt by not doing that versus a $30 million project or a combination of the two, $40 million. Is there something I'm missing with the yellow line, why that is such a drop in, it's like a $2 million drop in debt service annually?
So, Mr. Hidalgo, I think what is probably most instructive when comparing the lines is to compare the orange line to the other three lines. So where you see, because you are correct that it's only that $22 million, and it does have a substantial impact in this area right here. But there's also a very large gap between the dark blue and the green here, and then this area here too. So it's on the back end of the schedule. There's a more significant impact. So when you look at that, you're just seeing it in the out years versus the other years. So think about they're kind of stepping down. That turf and CIP, that's not included in either the dark blue or the green line either. So
The yellow line, the difference between the yellow line and all the projects, it just seems like that's a $2 million gap for a $2 million job. I didn't think it would be significant that our debt would drop, let's say in 2032, would drop from 18 million to 16 million. That's $2 million in debt service.
Mr. Stone, if I may?
Yeah.
And Mr. Hidalgo, if I'm hearing you correctly, that yellow line is, yes, the turf, but it's also 21 or 22 million in capital improvement projects. So it's not just the turf.
Okay, my apologies, capital improvement projects, which is, okay. That's why you said 22 million. Understood. I didn't understand the CIP, you know.
It's confusing.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just thought maybe that meant basketball courts in some odd way. All right, makes clear sense, sorry.
Good. Mr. Stone, when we met last Friday and I asked for projections about the financial impact of these projects, I didn't expect anything so clear and easily understood. So thank you very much.
pleasure.
I have a question.
Ms. Brooks.
So I understand the financial risks of doing it or not doing it, but if we don't do these projects, there's other financial risks because these buildings are old, and we have concerns about systems failing. If we delay this, we don't have the ability to use potentially Richboro Middle School for an extended period of time, and so that would ultimately mean that any delay in the projects would cost even more because we would have to phase them and look at doing them another way. So I understand this is the cost of doing the projects. Can you give us some sort of sense of what the potential cost could be to us if we don't do the projects?
Is that to me?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've asked that same question in
I
a
realize
slightly different way, but
it's
yeah, so you have financial costs, and then you have, and so yes, Mr. Taylor, I think it would be good for you to at least
Hoping Bill would give
provide the bulk of this answer.
Yeah, I mean, I
because-
realize we can't really capture a number, but it's not like we either do it or we don't, because there's other implications to this.
Right, and some of those implications are financial, and some of them, as Doug will talk about, you could have some kid-centric implications. So, Doug, if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking through those here the same way that you've talked through them with me.
Sure. No, it's an excellent question, and you're right on the money. You were taking things from my notes of things I wanted to wrap up with, so it's a good segue. So Hillcrest and Richboro absolutely rely on the Richboro Middle School for the phasing, and as I said, it's about $1 million per school for avoiding a lease of modulars, and probably another, couple $100,000 for each project to not extend the project 2 years versus a year. because the contractors extended overhead and profit that they have on projects. So you're looking at about $2.5 million worth of savings that we're realizing by utilizing the Richboro Middle School. And keep in mind that Richboro Middle School is a 1960s infrastructure. We replaced it for a reason. We're taking advantage of the last years of its life to use it for phasing of other projects and gain value from it. But I worry that it too will at some point tell us it's finished. We take very good care of all of our equipment. We maintain it. We have service contracts, and we're doing roof repairs because the roof is getting tired at that project. So the longer we extend this, the more I worry we won't have that building. So we would be at risk of changing the documents. I mean, these documents are basically planning on a project that's unoccupied. We'd have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to phase these over 2 years. It would be a different looking project, totally. There'd be other fees associated with professionals to rework these projects that you'd have to calculate in. So there's millions of dollars of consideration for the Hillcrest Richboro. And for Soul Finestone, one of the things that the capital plan that we prepare is to avoid surprises, right? We're trying to manage capital projects and avoid impact to education, all of us, right? We want kids to be in classrooms, and we want kids to be in warm, safe classrooms. And the Soul Finestone project worries me because, as I said during my presentation, the boilers are 32 and 52 years old in that boiler room. Getting parts is basically going on eBay. You know, you just don't find parts for these pieces of equipment any longer. And it's number 2 fuel oil serving those boilers. I've personally been involved with other districts in my life, my old life, where they failed. The oil, the sludge in the tank blocks the line, the boiler shut down. Next thing you know, you're trying to figure out how to fire them up, and if you can't, how do you get the building's heat? And if the heat goes in the middle of a cold winter and the pipes freeze, you know, what can happen? I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just pointing out things that could happen. If I don't say those things and it does happen, you'd say, well, why didn't you bring that up when we talked about renovating this building? You know, those are real things. The electrical capacity, as I said, is at its limit. It's at complete capacity. There's no additional capacity in those panels to do anything else. We're doing all we can. When a request comes from a teacher to add another air conditioning unit to a room, we do our best, but we're getting to the point where we're going to have to say, you probably have to relocate the teacher because we don't have the ability to facilitate those needs within that school any longer. The plumbing, the on-site sanitary, and the on-site water, those systems are, the field itself is okay for the sewer, but the pumps and the controls they need to be replaced. We've been avoiding these kind of projects because we knew that these bigger projects were coming. So they're not in the capital plan. They're monies that would have to be spent. The roofs on Hillcrest and Richboro both need to be replaced. They've been planned to be part of the project, so they would be projects we'd have to consider if we put those off. So, environmentally at Soul Finestone, there's been a lot of question about the asbestos, and we manage that. That's not something, to me, and Arif may have some other comments on that, but for me, we have an AHERA plan that we manage. We have a consultant who does 6-month walkthroughs. They record what they see visually in the building, and if there's any change to it, if there's any concern, if we need to consider projects. And as long as that remains undisturbed, it's safe in the condition it's in. If it was something that wasn't, we would have gone in and remediated it to this point. But as I said, as long as it remains undisturbed, and ideally we do those things when we get the projects. We're responsible to address those when we reasonably can. And as part of a renovation project, it's the time. In saying that, we've done that on many schools. So that's not something new to us at Council Rock. It's certainly not something new to me. I've probably done 15 projects similar to that in my old life before coming here, managing multi-year phase projects with environmental concerns. It's a routine thing. It's not done when kids or staff are in building. There's air clearance testing. But it would be good to get that out. It's just, something that is in the building. Indoor air quality, for me, a bigger concern today is with COVID and with the air exchange and with the ventilation of the systems. And we just have old, tired unit ventilators in that building that squeak next to kids at a desk. They're not, the kind of ventilating systems that we would want in a building today. So we can go in, and even if we don't do this project, we're going to look at putting the bipolar units in that school because it's important. Regardless, we're going to put those in because we know the first year we're building a new addition. So we want to make the building as safe as we can for kids from a COVID standpoint. We'll put those in, but that won't change the air exchange. It will just change the, we'll add that component. My concern is forcing, an unplanned school closure. If boilers fail, if the septic system fails, if something happens, you can't use toilets because the pumps or the grinder pumps in that system go bad. Part of capital planning and being responsible is managing that and not having emergency repairs, I would say. And so I worry. I worry about the building. It's one of the buildings. I worry about Richboro Middle. I worry about every building because even a new building can fail. But the age of the equipment is what really lends itself to failing. And
Could I add a couple of things there?
yeah.
Okay. So I think just to focus on the risk and potential costs. Obviously, you've seen the savings, the bid savings you've gotten. So that to me is one of the biggest risks that you'd be taking. Because you are currently in the most envious position of any one of my clients right now that are bidding projects. The savings you saw and the timelines that you've just beaten in terms of what's happening out there, you are literally in the most envious. So those savings that Doug showed you before, I don't want to repeat them, are probably one of the most, riskiest things that you'd be taking if you decide to rebid this project at a later time. So that's the number you have to look at. In addition to that, we have the ACE grants. You've got the ACE grants that, if depending what the delay is, and we have to rebid this project, I don't know how we're going to manage those. Those are potentially at risk, and that's, I think, $1.6 million.
What was the date, the spending on those ACE grants had to be by within how many years?
We had a deadline of, right now, both projects just comply with the deadline. So we'd have to request
Got it.
extension. But the concern I have is the value of what we're getting for that $1.6 million is at risk too, because of the numbers you saw. So to me, those are two big things. The one that you pointed out and Doug did is the phasing. Right now you have these projects in a situation that we can accomplish the phasing very, very effectively, still keeping educational programs going. That's potentially a big risk, and the number for that, without Richboro there, without the phasing, Doug's thrown some numbers at the table. They could be all over the place because, number one, your projects will be less attractive, so there's that variable that you don't know. So those are the risks I think you're taking. The other thing I just wanted to point out, I know Doug focused on the infrastructure. A lot of time has been spent on these buildings with the educational program. So I think, Dave mentioned some of the things where the classrooms are being right-sized. But beyond just the classrooms being right-sized, there's so many programmatic things that are being implemented in the projects, and the risk of not having those, I don't know what the price is for that, right? So I think those are kind of some of the variables, but the biggest one is the bid results you got are at risk. And there's no way to recover those or put a number on those. There really isn't, I'm being honest with you, because, Bill said it. There's so many variables that go in on bid day. We got the right variables. We got that combination bid that he recommended. It fell in the right place at the right time. The right contractor was there. So that's the risk that we're taking, I think, is the biggest one. The other ones are variables that would be very hard to put a real number on them, but the bid results are real.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Arif. Other questions or comments?
I just have a follow-up to my
Yeah, please.
misunderstanding. Why did we combine the turf field with the capital improvement projects of $22 million?
I don't know that I have a good answer for that, Mr. Hidalgo. on its own, the turf project is the smallest of the projects. So its impact on the base case would be difficult to measure. I think I probably viewed it as there were school projects. The three, Hillcrest, Richboro, and Solfeinstone kind of stand on their own, and then the other two components of the plan, I included them together just, I guess, for sake of analysis, ease of analysis. But they can, as I mentioned, each of these components can be split out, combined in any combination to come to a different line that you'll see up there, that you can see up there.
Okay, and I know we talked, you did mention Richboro Middle School. In your discussions, you guys must have been contemplating what we're going to do with that building from a financial standpoint and from your construction standpoint. Can you share anything with us today, or with me?
Do you mean beyond using it for the swing space?
Yeah, because if we're looking at going up and basically capitalizing all of our debt, or whatever you want to call it, what's the plan for Richboro Middle School in your discussions thinking forward?
Yeah, to be honest with you, our conversations didn't go that far. We had some conversations 3, 4, or 5 years ago, and some of that was even prior to Mr. Stone being with us here in CR. So Doug and I brought him up to speed on what some of that conversation was back in the day. But really, our conversations about the former RMS have been consistent with Solfeinstone just because those two buildings are of similar age. So the boilers, all the infrastructure is of similar concern to us. And so really, we just want to try to make sure that whatever we do, whenever we do it, we get through those 2 years of swing space, and then recognizing that obviously we'll need to have a plan and socialize that plan with the board, and the board will make a decision on that. But honestly, at this point, we're just trying to make sure that that building stays strong for us through Hillcrest and Richboro, whether we approve them in a couple weeks or at some point down the road.
I appreciate that, because that kind of just my one more question, because obviously this is a lot of projects going on. It ties into every building in some way or another in the district. And we just got done the 2 middle school constructions, and I know originally Schrader Group had, if I remember correctly, suggested a capacity of 1,250, sorry, was it 12,000? No, hold on, 1,250 student capacity, and we went to 980. So was the middle school at Newtown the general area, because that's where we seem to have problems for lunches and stuff like that, was that made for 980 kids, or was it built bigger?
Boy,
Middle.
I want to say it was 950 to 980. I mean, but
Yeah, they're both 980.
They're parities there, because the reason I ask is because Richboro Middle School may need to be used at some point if we change maybe to a 3-level middle school. If we had capacity issues at the middle school in the future, that's kind of what I was wondering if, that's why I want to protect that school from being like handed off or sold, or, because we may need the money. We may find we do these projects and say we have to sell that school. That's what I'm worried about,
Ms. Bialik.
Mr. Stone, I'm going to ask you to post that slide that shows the deficit. This is a very good slide, but it's nearly impossible to see on YouTube. I took a look at it. So this will be on board docs tomorrow, I'm assuming, if it's not already tonight. Yeah. So I'm looking for actually yeah, there you go. So in 2023, we're looking at, what was the last number when we went over the finance committee? Was it an $8 million deficit, a $4 million deficit? I don't recall.
If you give me just a second, I'll try to make it larger. In the baseline scenario, the ending fund balance is minus $94.6 million.
minus $94.6 million. In 2023, we're negative $12 million, which we can't do. We can't go negative. So, and this assumes this $74 million or $70+ million of projects that we're talking about tonight is in there, right? Everything we're talking about, Soul Feinstein, the two other elementary schools, and the turf, is that correct? Yes. And the CIP summer projects, everything, okay.
Yeah.
And this isn't worst-case scenario, this is projected, yes?
This is a baseline scenario, so it doesn't factor in, or it factors in certain real estate tax increases, but there are different scenarios that have higher and lower real estate tax increases. There are different scenarios that have higher or lower value for retirements in the professional staff. So this is the baseline. The one that we probably could consider kind of closest to reality is this, it's what we call status quo. So that then layers in a factor for retirement savings and also kind of resets some of the budget assumptions. Like, for example, this fiscal year, we budgeted at a deficit, but the assumption is that there was sufficient conservatism to not actually finish with a deficit. So it brings that back to zero. So that takes the deficit to minus $53 million. So still not something that we can sustain, but it's significantly less. And that this model still includes the projects that we just discussed, as well as ongoing commitment to CIP in the summer projects.
That's a great explanation, thank you. And I like that we gained some ground there by using the status quo, so we don't go bankrupt in 2023, we do it in 2024. That's positive, that's positive. It's still terrible, but it's positive. So this also assumes a max tax increase, yes?
It assumes, yes, it assumes a maximum tax increase, but the Act 1 index is just a projection, and it is about I think it's 1.6 for 23, 24, and 25, and then 2.3% in 2026. So it's slightly lower than this year's 3%, and that, again, when we built this model, that was based on what we were expecting to see entering a recessionary economy with the onset of the pandemic.
And anybody that paid attention or watched the Finance Committee last week saw that the Act 1 index is actually going to be increasing somewhere around 3% to 3.7% a year, and the cumulative effect would be about 18% tax increase over a 4 or 5 year period. I don't remember what it is. So if this board and future boards decided to increase taxes to the maximum amount, that might get us into reaching negative territory maybe later in 2024, but probably still in 2024.
Yes.
Okay.
So the assumption in the model now, in that same scenario, the only thing that I changed was the amount that could be raised in real estate taxes. And forgive me because I don't know what those percentages are now, but they're obviously much higher because that ending fund balance in 25, 26 is now minus 20 million. So if there is the ability to increase taxes more and this board and future boards were to do so, then that could have a very positive impact on that ending fund balance in the out years of the plan. That's very small, I'm sorry.
It's very hard to see, but anybody who is watching this and who has an interest should access these documents on Board Doc, because this is the future of our district here. This is the future of the children, this is the future of our community, this is the future of our property values, this is the future of our district. So we've now gained ground just by maximum tax increases, a not a baseline, assumed a projected scenario, and we're still negative in 2024. It's 2021, that's a very short period of time, about 2.5 years away, and that's very concerning. So all this work needs to be done, there's no doubt about that. All of the middle schools need to be reconditioned. The turf doesn't need to be done, but it should be done. And the summer projects, the CIPs certainly have to be maintained. So that's the problem. And so when I'm looking at $74 million worth of projects, and they all make sense and they all are required, but then I'm looking at what are we doing to the health of our district, and where is it in between? Are we building buildings and maintaining buildings just to have to cut, I'm back to that 144 jobs? Then we don't have teachers and staff to work in those buildings, or a lot less. So this is problematic. I feel like, for me, voting for this just kind of puts us on a terrible trajectory here. So, and I don't know what the answer is, but I would really like to see a delay, right? And I understand the concerns about delay, Doug, and I understand, Arif, what you had said. And I respect your opinion, Arif, absolutely 100%, but you are receiving compensation for these programs, and I understand that you're not driven necessarily by the compensation, but it's $1.2 million. So if I had $1.2 million at stake, I'd want to move forward with that as quickly as possible as well. The concern is, first of all, the capitalized interest. If we add capitalized interest, isn't there a risk to our credit rating with capitalized interest? Didn't PFM give us a bit of a warning with that?
Yes, there is. The larger risk as far as a bond rating is our reserves. If our reserves, and that's what's specifically noted by Standard & Poor's, is that if our reserves decline, then they would drop the rating. That's their main focus.
And our reserves decline to nothing by 2024 under these projections, which again aren't worst case scenario, but assumed case. So if we could delay just a year and take a look at this again, I think it would be most prudent. Richboro Middle School is going to be available in a year. I don't know what the cost per the bids would be. I really don't. The $8 million in savings is significant. That's real money. I don't know what the cost would be. I'd be interested to find out from the contractors if they'll maintain those bids. I don't know. It's not my expertise about the building costs. This is a very fast rise in building costs, and I feel like and this is just a guess, it feels like this could balance out because we have this overwhelming demand. At some point, people are going to stop wanting to do every bit of work they put off over the past 10 years to their homes, and contractors are going to be looking for work again, and the supplies are going to ease, and that's just supply and demand. Right? I mean, warehouse workers aren't working and maintaining these things and making these materials because of COVID. At some point, that bell curve is going to go the other way. As people get vaccinated, we get back in the world, and if we don't, we have bigger problems. So my desire would be to wait, to pause on all the projects, but, certainly let's be really picky about the ones we have to do. If it makes sense somehow to save the $8 million on these bids and move forward with those, and we can reconcile that against taking the district down to negative or $0 and not being able to pay salaries and benefits and all the things that we talked about the last, what are the options for making us balanced where we need to be? And we talked about cutting benefits, reducing salaries, or eliminating salaries. So are we building to reduce our staff and affect our staff? I don't know. So these are all the things that keep me up at night. I know I'm rambling on. Let me just check to see if I have any other thing. I don't think so. But I'd like to see, and I'd ask my fellow board members to consider, let's see a pause. Let's see how we shake out over the next year with this recovery. Maybe it's better. Maybe we end up and we have a larger fund balance than we think. But this seems very, very irresponsible to me to move forward with any type of project, albeit necessary, while we're in this financial crisis. Make no mistake, this is a financial crisis. What we're looking at is running out of money, negative. We have bankrupted the district by 2024, and that's a crisis. So I would just ask for patience and a bit of a delay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks?
Mr. Stone, you're recommending that we move forward on these now? Or, I'm just curious, you are our financial expert and are, coming with a recommendation to us. Why would you, or would you not recommend a delay? Why is your recommendation for us to move forward now?
My recommendation is to delay. I agree with Mr. Bialik. I think that taking a year to assess the overall impact of COVID is important. We are dealing with an $8.1 million budget deficit with a maximum tax increase, and it is difficult to reconcile the recommendation to move forward, again, for me, to move forward with those, with these projects in light of those circumstances.
Question.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Oh, I would just say, good question, Ms. Brooks. I would just say if we vote for these, if we vote to do it now, we've already projected full tax increases for the next 5 years, 3%, 3.7, whatever has been projected last week, maybe goes to 2.6 in year 5. The work needs to be done, a lot of great work being done just preparing for the projects, but, I didn't vote to go out to bid because I don't think we are even close to being able to afford this right now. And we got a lot of work to do, but I think I agree with delaying for some time because we have to get our feet, soundly on the ground. Thanks.
Other questions, comments? Anyone? Block.
Yeah, in order to consider what we've heard, I'd like to understand how much time we have to do that and potentially have more discussion. So if we were going to vote this up or down, well, we have to, right? What's our timeline?
So this is slated to be on the agenda for the April board meeting, April 8th, I believe it is. So we have Education Committee scheduled a week from tonight. The following Thursday is scheduled to be off, leading into spring break. And then the 8th would be the following Thursday.
Given we have 60 days on the bid, do we have flexibility with that date, or did you pick the 8th? Because, and I know you mentioned you want to get started as soon as you could.
Yeah, I mean, I can let Arif add to this, but I think based on where we are with procurement of materials and needing the time, the critical nature of getting that first phase done in a year to make the projects work, both projects, I don't know that we can wait a day beyond the 8th to get materials here. If we're moving forward and we're going to be successful, I don't think we can delay. But Arif, if you disagree.
No, I agree. In fact, my, humble request will be to give us some indication on what we're doing, if we're not doing anything or if we're doing something, because between now and April 8th, I mean, you saw Doug's presentation, but there are contracts for every one of those things that have to be put together and gotten in front of the solicitor for review. And we just can't, not do that. It's going to take us all of from tomorrow till, to get this before you guys for the April 8th meeting. Now, why April 8th? Our notice to proceed by contract, from a risk standpoint, is April 19th for these projects to comply with our contract terms. So April 19th, we have to give contractors signed contracts and let them begin procurement. I can tell you, many of them are already hedging their bets on this and, trying to lock in prices and all that. And I will also say, I respect what you're saying, but I'll be honest with you, all my work at Council Rock, I would advise you to make the right decision for you. This is not about Dewey Engineering or a reef. And so respectfully, my comments about the risk that you're taking by not accepting these bids and putting the fact that you're in an envious position, I'm telling you, in almost 35 years of doing this, I've never seen bid results like this on two combined projects, and the value you're getting is tremendous. So, respectfully, I respect what you're saying, but this is strictly about Council Rock School District. We've always done the right thing for you, and in this case, my humble request would be to give us some guidance on what we need to do for April 8th. Whichever way the decision is fine. But if we have to put these contracts together, it's a tremendous amount. We're talking about 12 prime contractors. We're talking about all of those construction testing contracts, balancing contracts. All of those things have to be put together in place. We got to get together with Conservation District meetings to basically let these contractors start on time. There are just so many planning things to happen. And right now, everybody's worked really hard for you to get to this point, and we just need to make sure we're ready for you as we've always been. So that would be my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif.
I really do want to respond to that. I appreciate the position that you're in and all the contractors, and you got to move on if we vote no. This is the first day that I'm looking at this. We've got 150 slides. We've got 4 schools. We've got 5 years of tax increases to a community of hundreds of thousands of people. And it's the cost of doing business when you put these bids in here that you got to give a board the time to sleep on it than to ask us to sit here after less than 2 hours and you want me to give you a definitive or, a good gist. I mean, look, I already went into it not looking for a bid, but for others who are on the line, it's hard. It's a hard position to be in here on this side and to be not getting compensated and putting ourselves out there to represent the community. I have to respectfully ask you to give us the time to understand where we're at and invite you to try to maybe go on a school board and make these decisions and give back, and maybe you are.
Let's keep the conversation focused on the.
Okay, so I will just ask that you please give the board a little bit of leniency here, and I do apologize, but if you're going to get an answer out of everybody here tonight, then let's just vote.
Mr. Tate, could I jump?
Yeah, please, Mr. Blah.
The heart wants to do these projects. The kids deserve these projects. The buildings are screaming to get done. And then there's the financial realities of what we're doing. It is a lot to take in tonight. And, if there is a consideration to delay to be had, I think it's really important that we flush through what the specific options would be to mitigate that spike at the beginning. Because if there's I appreciate, Bill, you putting yourself out there just now and talking about what you do. That weighs significantly on everybody at this table. It's also, really risky not to do it. And you made some comments about different strategies we could take to mitigate that spike at the beginning. So, I appreciate all the work that goes into getting this done. But I'd also like to do the work to say, hey, before we move to delay, if that's the best decision, what mitigation steps might we take to make folks potentially feel more confident in a decision to move forward? Because right now, to Mr. Hidalgo's point, I've got one on this shoulder and one on this shoulder, whisper in my ear to do one thing or the other. So I want to think about specifically what some of our projections look like when these projects were on track first time around, and compare that to what our projections look like now. I'd like to be able to think of some questions to pose based on your earlier statements around mitigation strategies. And, I don't know if we have an opportunity to flip around our meeting schedule to talk about this again in a week. This is, whether it's thinking about full year tax increases or full tax increases every year, that's a scary thought. Running out of money is a scary thought. Not doing these buildings is a scary thought. This is probably the most important decision that we're going to make. And I think everybody wants to be right. I think we're in different places. And I think we should give ourselves a little time to think about it and come back and talk about it. But at the same time, still respect the fact that you guys want to try and get it done on the 8th. So we'll have to work fast and ultimately, make a call.
Well, I appreciate the explanation as to what the timeline looks like and why, and the confines around that timeline, I don't think clearly are not created by our consultants, and it's just a matter of reality that we have these bids and we only have so much time to act on them. And it is a very tight timeline, but I think it's important that we understand exactly the constraints on our decision making. Mr. Stone, I've got the bad habit of asking you tough questions. I'm sorry. Can you ballpark the ESSER funding? Do you have any sense as to what that might look like?
The second round that we received, we know our allocation for that is 1.1 million. I've seen allocations in the 2.2 million range, but again, I mentioned there are some set-asides that we may have to use some of those funds for specific purposes, which could reduce that, and that's where it gets to be a little gray. So it would be could be $3.3 million between those two sets of funds.
That's real helpful. Thank you. Some other items on the facilities agenda?
Yeah, let me just add one thing, and I just want to clarify, the need to know isn't to put pressure on you guys tonight, and I don't think that was the intent. There's also a need to tell the contractors which way we might be going, because they all have their own families and lives, and they're looking to procure other work. And if these projects aren't going to happen and they're counting on these projects for the next year or 2 or 3, the sooner we can tell them that that's not the case so they can go back out and bid more work, because they're obviously not going to lock up other jobs knowing that these could be there. So and the reason for that is for us as a district to maintain good bid relationships with these contractors, because if we do unintentionally upset them and we want to put this back out to bid next year, I assure you the person that gave us the low bid is going to say, if I was $6 million under budget and didn't get the job, what do I have to be to get the job this year? And how do I know I'll get it? So, for us to continue to have these good bid relationships with people that keep following us, the sooner we can let them know those things, the better. And if we know before the 8th that we're just not going to do it, I'd love to be able to tell them we're going to officially reject these on the 8th, but go back out and start bidding jobs because I don't want to hurt you guys. So that's some of it too,
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
I'm going to actually start, I'm going to respond to what you said.
No,
Please,
wait,
Chair.
just 1 second, please, Jeff. Did you wish to comment? Okay, Ms. Marcel.
I just wanted to see if I could say something. So this is really tough. And as Mr. Block was mentioning, there are a lot of kind of pieces of this that we do need time to process. I also think the public needs some time to process this, because what we are going to be doing or not obviously affects them tremendously. And so I would like to, hear from our parents, our community, about what is their response to this potentially, specific to the families at these schools too, because I know that a lot of Wrightstown parents that are now at Sulphine-Stone have told me that they're concerned about some of the transition for taking place for their children for next year, potentially after spending, whether it's a whole year out of school or however long. This year has been very challenging, and that's the only building where, the students would remain in the building and be kind of transitioning around. And so I just would like to spend the time. I think it's worth it. I do appreciate, Mr. Taylor, we do have to let these companies know. And so I, of course, appreciate that. But I also think that we need to take the time for our public and community to tell us also what is on their minds. They could be thinking of something, that we're really overseeing at this point. And so I think, having that extra time is going to be valuable for us because this decision is not the same as it was a year ago. The whole world shifted, in the meantime. And so I think that the work that was done by Mr. Taylor and his team is amazing. The bids look great. So thank you so much for everyone that worked on that. Mr. Stone, I really appreciate you explaining our financial position because I think that makes this decision, while it makes it a lot harder, it's easy to understand because you're helping us through this. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their assistance. And I just look forward to more information. And I encourage the public to tell us if they have any strong feelings or thoughts about this, because I think it will help us to get through it as a community. Thank you.
Dr. Thorward.
I wasn't going to talk, and then Mr. Marcel just pegged me here a little bit with some of this. First, thanks for everything that was put into this. The decision's almost not hard because the math says we can't do it. The projections say we're bankrupt in 3 or 4 years. Even if we do it with that projection, it hamstrings the future boards all the way out for 25 years because our debt ceiling's maxed out. I'll throw a bone in that we probably can afford to do a little bit. We can do some. I was pretty adamant about a year ago that the next thing I vote for is the turf we owe the community we promised one to a year ago. And I think we can afford that if nothing else. Maybe it's frivolous, maybe it's not, but we pulled the rug out of that community twice now, and I won't do it a third time. Mr. Stone, I would ask you, can we break this up? Can we do smaller pieces? Should we? Should we is always an option for my board to consider as well. But, we're looking at, what was that, $129 million worth of bids, projects all at once, coming off of COVID with an $8 million deficit. And I'll just mention and finish, there has been no vote on that 3% tax increase yet, so there's no guarantee that's coming as well. So leave it at that. More time is fine. We can talk about it some more.
Mr. Hidalgo.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. I wanted to respond to your comment was similar to his, that we have to let these families know. When we went to go for the bid, you said, we just got to put it out there to see what it comes back, because I really don't think we can afford this. We knew this 3 years ago. At some point, we have issues, and it's really coming to the front here. But to say that we're going to upset contractors, that really is just not. It just doesn't seem to be a way to make a $70 million sale, to me. And so I'm getting a little frustrated, and I'll just tell you that this is a little frustrating to me. What I would like to know, because as I said, it's a long presentation, and I do want to get these projects done, and I usually have a lot of questions when we go through each school. It's good to really dig in and understand little things, even as trivial as rock excavation and paying $50,000 for 2 schools to kind of ensure yourself you're not removing boulders, and I have plenty of questions about that. But one question that I will ask you now is, who gave the bid that saved $5 million between the 2 projects, or over $5 million, and where did they find those cost savings? It's very curious to me.
I'm not sure I understand. Is that a question?
Yeah, so Who, I'm sorry, you can't cut me off every time in public.
Trying to help, Joe.
No, it's okay. I'll ask him. Who won the bid that saved the $5 million that was up there? Which contract? Was it a general contractor or total?
It's a combination of all of the contractors that,
Did the combo bid?
yes, there's a mechanical, plumbing, electrical for each of the projects, but combined, it's just a single mechanical, plumbing, electrical contractor that
The
would,
general? Who was the general contractor that did that?
that would, the apparent low for the combined bid for
Low.
Hillcrest and Richboro
Yeah,
is Skepton Construction.
okay. And so I was just wondering how do they save that kind of money on, it's like over 10%.
The savings are a combined savings between the four prime contractors, not them alone, and through some of the ACE grant monies and through other savings on that project. It's not just one entity that's saving us all of the money.
Right, but on average, they're lowering their price by 10%, and I'm just wondering, it's not happening at the same time, and it's just interesting, because you say that's not usually how it works.
Well, what I've said is I have not seen in my years of experience with this, a combined bid be successful to this degree. And the success is clearly because we had a general contractor come in who wasn't interested in bidding two $11 million projects, but was interested in a $22 million project. So he said, I'm not going to bid individual projects, I'm just not interested. But I am interested, my company does bigger projects, and I am interested in a $20 million plus contract. So that was what was appealing to him, and he said, I'm going to try to, he didn't, but the assumption is, he said, I'm going to come in and just give a combined bid number and go for it and see if I can get the job. And he lined the job up based on the success of that low number. So, and the contractor's very good. I have experience with them back in the day. Saucon Valley School District added on to their high school, a K through 8 onto their 9 through 12 school. So it's a K through 12 facility. He built that in record time. They built Penn Ridge, project at Penn Ridge with me in record time. And the Souderton High School project, they built in record time. And I'm sure David and Arif could give you other projects as well, but they're a very good, well-known school construction contractor.
No, I appreciate that, and they're a new face to the school district,
us.
so that's really good. I like that. So I apologize, I'm not trying to put you on the seat here, it's just, this is tough, because, there may be some between 5 people, you may get some of this work done, but I don't think we're going to get it done tonight. And to Andy's point, maybe it takes another special reschedule so you guys can work it out. I'm pretty firm on I didn't go out to bid, so I'm just, where I'm kind of leaning at this point, because it's all very difficult for us right now from a financial standpoint. And it's hard to walk away from these significant savings and the cost of materials, as everybody knows, if you have been involved lately. But to Mr. Bialik's point, things are in a cycle right now, and we're in a pretty high demand because everybody's been cooped up, and see what happens. Thank you, Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. Anybody else? I'll just comment real quickly. I appreciate all the valuable information we've gotten from Mr. Taylor and Mr. Stone and our consultants, Arif, Mr. Schrader. Thank you very much. I think one of the most worn out colloquialisms in America is kick the can down the road. I think these projects really epitomize the issue of kicking the can down the road. I mean, I've been in Saul Finestone for about close to 20 years as a parent and homeroom parent and so forth. And it's clearly a school that needs renovation. I'll point out that all 3 of these elementary schools are the 3 final schools in Council Rock that lack air conditioning. And that is this very significant issue. We have lost classroom days in these schools because they're unair conditioned and it is untenable to hold class without air conditioning. And air conditioning can't be added to Salt Finestone. Salt Finestone is the largest elementary school in our district, and it is close to capacity. Only 2 other schools right now are operating at a greater utilization level. And I'm biased, Salt Finestone is close to my heart, but to be honest, I think it's a project that needs to be done just as much as Hillcrest and Richboro Elementary. I think all 3 need to be done. Paying for it is the difficult part. I think without a question, I agree with Mr. Bialek and Dr. Thorwart and others who've said that we absolutely owe the turf project to Council Rock South, and the tennis courts have to be replaced. They're part of athletic competition. So all of these projects need to be done, and the financing looks really daunting. I don't know if in the end we're going to end up doing some, but not all of these projects. That would be disappointing. It may be the only alternative. Clearly we have some financial challenges. I think it would be great, Ms. Marcel and I have talked about the issues with Salt Finestone and the phasing and concern about from the community, and I think it's going to be good to hear more from the community what their thoughts are. And that's not the ideal situation for a school renovation. But we did it at Holland Middle School. We've done it elsewhere. And I've got confidence in our team that if we had to go forward with a phased renovation with students in the school, it could be done successfully. It's a set of very tough decisions, and it does feel rushed, but that's no one's error in planning. It's just the nature of the beast. It's what we're faced with. We've got a little bit of time to talk and explore and ask more questions. And yeah, if there needs to be a special meeting, I don't see any reason why not. We have some other items on the agenda, and I don't see any reason why, once we get through those, if we want to come back to any further discussion on these projects, I think that would be fine. But if no one has any further comments or questions right now, let's move forward with the agenda, please.
Okay. These are the bids for the summer projects. We did receive some favorable bids for these as well. I know these are coming from a much different budget that we do have in place. So I'm comfortable saying we should move forward with these. These are maintaining schools. We have a number of glass panels at South, exterior windows that are in bad condition. This replaces those, and a couple panels here at Chancellor. They came in about $120,000 under budget. We have the natatorium starting blocks for Brian Johnson at the swimming program. The starting blocks are actually getting slippery and dangerous and do not comply with today's standards for starting blocks. This bid came in slightly over budget, but we did add some needed tile repair around the pool deck. It's an ongoing maintenance project at the pool, so not in bad shape. This project is the HVAC that we tabled last year because we didn't get competitive bids. We did get good competitive bids this year. We included an alternate for the heat exchanger, which came in at $12,000, and we had numbers in the range of $25,000 last year. So this project is about $108,000 under budget. We saw considerable savings from last year's numbers. The Star Center signal and school flasher project, I'm sure some of you are seeing the emails from residents of flashers that are constantly challenging the district. We need to get out and put new signal flashers in around our district, 15-mile-an-hour flashers. This project came in well under budget. We split out the Star Center signal separate from the flasher projects. Armour & Sons is the low bidder, and we saved significant monies from where we thought we would be on this project.
Real quick on that one.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, that's flashers throughout the district, not
Yes.
the Star Center. We're going to fix it all.
Everything.
Everything. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm happy and excited to do that.
Yes.
And the associated signage on intersecting streets and things.
We've approved this already, or is it coming?
These will be for approval on April 8th.
Okay.
Yeah. The Holland Middle School Rain Garden, this is basically rerouting the trail around the wet area and addressing the Conservation District's request to modify this rain garden that didn't function as we had planned. It's about $9,000 over the budget we planned. This is B. Blair again, who would be the low bidder on the turf, but they're the low bidder on this. South Terrazzo repairs, the number looks well over budget at $80,000, but there's a project allowance that includes a line item of $73,000 for the allowance. It was a square foot cost to repair Terrazzo, and the number came much higher than we expected the unit price to be. So this $73,000 is returned to us if we do no additional repairs. And we have an alternate in here for about $47,000. There's an area of floor that is delaminating that we tested. There's moisture beneath the slab. We want to see exactly what's happening. So by performing this scope of work, we'll gain insight on future repairs there down the road. So this project is in much better shape than that bottom line appears. HVAC indoor air quality improvements, as I mentioned, we are in the process of bidding this so we can get these systems in all the schools. This would include Richboro Elementary School because that project would not happen for a year after Hillcrest if we do move forward. It also includes Sol Finestone Elementary School because we wouldn't get into that building until the second year, so we'd want to make sure we're addressing it, and the Richboro Middle School as well, since it's a swing school. The units from those three buildings, after those projects would be completed, would be stocked in our warehouse and used for replacements in the district throughout, because the unit is consistent throughout all the schools. And we've budgeted that, and I've included that in the overall budget when I compared the numbers. And the last is an unexpected project. We had our insurance provider look at the deck at the sale house. By today's standards, that deck does not comply with code. There's been so many deck failures from deck parties that the code has become very stringent. And we by no means use this deck for our program. We'll remove the deck. We'll put an egress stair in its place, a simple stair to get from the second floor down to grade. And that's something that we're in the process of taking care of so that we get rid of the safety hazard. So the bottom line is we go through all of these bids, and I won't go bore you with the numbers. Carrying the anticipated bid results for the indoor air quality and stair construction of the budgeted line item, we're about $336,000 under budget for all of those projects. So we'll be able to safely award the other projects and award the other two at a later date after we receive those bids. The timing of these, as I said, is basically the April 8th meeting, and then the other projects will be awarded in June. And then lastly, the board agenda items. This is, again, if you see the top, recommended board decision. This is not a decision. This is still open for discussion. And again, we didn't anticipate this response tonight. This is just what the board agenda items could be. It was the combined bid, Sol Finestone, the turf, if you were to move forward with the turf, the professional service agreements for all of these projects. As Arif said, there are countless number of agreements that have to be prepared. Professional service agreements, the contracted service agreements for moving services, which we would have to move forward with so they can prepare, and I can prepare. Mr. Vaca over at Hillcrest, he has not been through this. We would have to prepare him to start packing and moving. So there's a lot of things we have to do on the planning side if we do move forward with these projects. The capital improvement projects, which I mentioned, will be on the agenda. And by the way, those numbers also include about $150,000 in material allowances in those low bid costs in totality. So we're in good shape on those projects. And the April 8th meeting is a key meeting. So if there needs to be a meeting in between, I'm happy to attend. I would also note that we did, present to the community right before COVID the phasing for Sol Finestone and what that project looks like. And that's certainly something that we would, offer again, should we consider doing something like that, so we can re-engage community. They could be fully aware of what the project would look like. So I just want to note that while we did do that, it was, on the eve of the pandemic, and that's something we would want to do at any time, but we would offer that up again as well.
Mr. Taylor, do you think it would be possible to add that file to board docs just so that it's easier for the public to find if they were interested in looking at it?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good idea. Thank you.
That is it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Board comments, questions? As I said, we can go back to the earlier discussion. Mr. Block.
Yeah, like I said before, I'd like some time to think about it. I'd love for Mr. Stone to noodle on if we were going to try and talk ourselves into it as opposed to a delay, what the most responsible way to do that would be. If you can't come up with one, that's understandable too. But I'd like to know when we could reasonably come back to it to allow us to hear from the community, to allow us to contemplate what we've heard tonight, and to allow you guys to, react to some of what you heard.
Yeah, if it's agreeable to the board, I know that we have a very full education committee meeting a week from tonight, but if we're up for it, I would suggest that we just tag on to that meeting and come back to this general topic. We could do a separate evening if we want to, but if we're agreeable to just extending that evening, I think that might be the best case scenario. And, between the three of us, we've certainly discussed a number of different scenarios, and we will continue to do so. And I think this evening's conversation is helpful in advancing all of that. And as I said at the outset of this evening, this is perhaps the first time that really just uncomfortable coming to the board with any kind of a firm recommendation. Because, and I've said it before and I'll probably say it again, I feel like I could clearly articulate an argument for doing some segment of these projects, and I could equally articulate why we shouldn't do any of these projects right now. I think the case is there on both ends. The one assurance that I would give the board this evening is that any recommendation that could possibly come from me as superintendent would not include all of these projects. That's a certainty that I do now have. So it would be something less than all four of these. So I saw some heads nodding. If it's agreeable to the board, Mr. Tate, then I would suggest that we add on to next Thursday's Education Committee meeting and come back with some of our additional thinking and thought process, and hear from the community in the meantime, and allow for some further board dialogue and deliberation.
I like the suggestion. Are there any objections? Mr. Bialik?
Yeah, I'd like to have a separate meeting. I mean, this is $74 million that we're talking about spending, and to tack it on to, we start with an executive session at 6 o'clock. We have our Education Committee meeting. I feel like we're not going to give it the time it deserves. So I'm not opposed to an additional meeting, a special meeting. We have a week. This is, again, this is the future of our district we're talking about here. So I think it demands the time to be able to have the public here if they want to speak, and we can't go into midnight and try to make a decision on this. That's my feeling.
Yeah, as I said, administratively, we're fine with that as well.
And Mr. Tate's, or sorry, not Mr. Tate, Mr. Salamon's not here. Maybe give Mr. Salomon and Ms. Marcel an opportunity to work around the board to see what availability looks like in the course of the next 7 to 10 days, and circle back with you to see when that could be. And I would imagine we have to figure that out in the next 24 hours or 48 hours, just so we can let the public know when that's going to be and get it advertised and all that good stuff.
I think it's a fair point, and I think also, Mr. Bialik, we might be able to move the executive session just so that it's not as long of an evening.
Well, if I may, I'm expecting a pretty robust education committee discussion as well. I have to know what's coming on that. That's not going to be a quick meeting.
Good. All right. So Ms. Marcel and Mr. Salomon will work on identifying a date
think I'll be
And,
helping Mr. Solomon in the next 24 hours, but he is texting me, and so he's
Yeah.
still aware of what's going on.
I'm sure he is. Sounds good. Thank you very much, everyone, and if there's nothing else,
I do, sir.
Mr. Hidalgo.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, when we're going to be doing the budget and everything else, it's in there, the tax increases that we're budgeting, right? But it's kind of buried in the numbers, what we're anticipating projected tax increases. I know we spoke about it, and I have a request. That maybe we can somehow get that out in front for the public to see clearly what we are planning to do in order to keep up with budgets. And if, I don't want to increase taxes, but I don't know how we're not going to do some kind of tax increase. But when we talk about the projections and we see graphs and we say we can afford these projects and everything, if you want the public feedback, I think really coming out there and say, what numbers are we using for tax increases? This is the low, this is the high. That would be really great to know, because I think people would really look at it from a different standpoint, because it's not just building schools, it's the entire school district, it's the entire financial, where we've gotten ourselves over the years. And you know, I think it's important for us, if we could get that out somehow, that would be my request. And I'm sorry if you had to say something, Mr. Stone.
I was simply going to clarify if you were referring to the projection model, and you did so. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments, questions? None? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Not an easy meeting.